Hey guys, Ghost here, welcome back to the channel, and today I've got some gameplay and first impressions of an upcoming multiplayer survival game, which I'm happy to be able to say I had a lot of fun with. This is Dune Awakening, developed by Funcom, the same folks who made Conan Exiles and Metal Hellsinger, and a big thank you to them for inviting me to this playtest to have an early look at the game. So after a brief or extremely lengthy character creation process, depending on what kind of a person you are, because I know some folks like to spend more time than others, that is followed by a run-in with the Bene Gesserit.
Come here. Kneel.
You find yourself crash-landed upon Arrakis with absolutely nothing, and as you progress through the game, you must craft yourself a variety of tools, weapons, and vehicles to get by, each more complex than the last. You construct your own residence where you can process and refine materials and construct new items, and of course there'll be a ton of exploration and Dune combat with all the interesting gadgets and doodads from the universe like the Shigawire Claw, suspensor belts and shields. The map is absolutely huge, even though what we got to play was just a small slice of the game, and it's just like this giant sandbox ready for you to explore. Now, this being a survival game and you being on one of the most dangerous planets in the solar system, there are a lot of elements you need to consider that you don't see in most games. Obviously, water is going to be the first big one. The way this works is that as you become less hydrated and drop below the little markers on the water bar there, you will have less stamina available, which is important in itself for things like dashing in combat or climbing. And you can climb everything in this game. It's kind of like the new Zelda games in that regard. If you become completely dehydrated, you will start to lose health, and if you stay in direct sunlight for too long, you will start to lose water even faster, of course, further compounding the urgency to find some. So recovering health in this game is pretty easy. You can just use bandages that are easily crafted on your person with readily available materials found in the world. But the same cannot be said for the water. So at the beginning of the game, you can drink the dew off of flowers at nighttime, but this will only fill your water level up to like around 1/3 or so, and then as you progress, you will craft blood containers which can hold quite literally the blood of your enemies, and then that has to be refined to turn it into drinkable water that you can take with you. You can drink the blood straight up to replenish your hydration a bit, but that will come with a debuff that lowers your maximum health. And then later on in the game, you will create, I think it's called a Dew Reaper, that lets you harvest the water from flowers and deposit it straight into a container. Now, outside of that then, there are a vast array of different enemy camps and factions dotted all around the map, which will definitely be a challenge to your survival. To find them, you can launch a survey probe by climbing up one of the highest structures you can find, like a rock column, and that will sort of map out a large area of the game for you, revealing what's there. And whilst we're on the subject of climbing, I absolutely love the fact that you can climb anything in this game. You can go anywhere, and one of the biggest worries about the game for me was like, isn't it just going to be super boring if the planet is literally a desert made of sand? After all, most other games have different biomes, Arrakis doesn't. But they've done a great job differentiating the various zones and really making them stand out. So in the first area of the Haga Basin where you start off, everything is yellow. Once you move to the Vermilius Gap, the sand now has a red hue due to the abundance of iron that can be found there. And likewise, there's way more verticality than I expected too, with plenty of old man-made structures to explore from ages past, and underground caverns and caves. Outside of that, of course, on the open sands, you have the sandworms to contend with. So this meter here represents how close the sandworm is in that region, coupled with how much vibration you're making on the sand. Essentially, what are your chances one of these things is about to attack you? I think each region actually has its own worm that resides in that area. You know, they don't just randomly spawn in, they actually move around their habitat, and let me tell you, they have really like nailed the atmosphere with these worms. You'll start to see them in the distance, you'll start to hear the eerie noise of them approaching, and the fantastic music that accompanies it. The soundtrack of this game is amazing, by the way, and the first time you encounter one face to face, it is an experience. So I noticed a ship falling from the sky, which turns out are unscripted events that can happen at any time, so that's pretty cool. So naturally, I had to go down and check it out to see if there's any loot there. Only I didn't realize that this ship just landed on drum sand, which is especially sensitive to vibrations, and sure enough, it wasn't long until Mr. Worm showed up. So I jumped on my sand bike and I just managed to get to rocky terrain in time, but I absolutely crapped myself. Now, if you do die to one of these worms, you lose everything on your person. It is literally the worst way you can die in the game. It's better to die to really anything else but a sandworm, because you just, everything is just gone. Then you have these giant Corialis Storms, essentially massive sandstorms, that blow across large areas of the map at the drop of a hat. So you'll be out exploring somewhere, and all of a sudden, there's a storm warning as you're in a heated battle against a bunch of scavengers, and you have to now find yourself somewhere to take cover. If you don't find shelter, you will lose health. If you leave your vehicle out in it, it'll become battered and beaten and lose a lot of durability. During the nighttime, Sardaukar dropships will fly down and they are sort of scanning the surface of Arrakis looking for survivors, and if you happen to land in one of their searchlights, they will stun you in place, and then they will beam down some Cho mercenaries to take you on. So yeah, basically everything in this world is trying to kill you. Now, you guys have been seeing some combat footage in the background, and you'll probably have noticed that Dune Awakening has both melee and ranged weapons. The weapon you start off with is a simple dagger, which has 2 different attacks. It has a simple combo executed by spamming left click, which can be used to stagger your opponent and throw them off balance, and then if you hold left click, you will do a heavy strike, which is essential for breaking through shields. Then you've got a parry ability with the right click, which, if executed correctly, will once again stagger your enemy. Now, there are more melee weapons like swords that can hit multiple enemies at once with a slower attack speed, but the melee combat in general, it is pretty basic. As far as I know, you only have the one combo and this one strong attack and the parry, but this was never going to be like Dark Souls, right? Nor is it supposed to be. A lot of the skill in the combat comes from choosing where and when to engage enemies, or sometimes beating a hasty retreat if you're outnumbered. Now, the ranged weapons are numerous, but they all fire darts because apparently gunpowder just doesn't exist on Arrakis, or even in the Dune universe, I think, and so they use these weapons with spring-loaded mechanisms on them. But I found them to be very satisfying to use. You've got a ranged rifle and a pistol, there's the scattergun, which fires a bunch of darts like a shotgun, and then the disruptor sort of pelts the enemy with a high rate of fire like a submachine gun to pierce through shields. And then on top of all of that, you have your character abilities. Now, there are several different archetypes to choose from when you create your character. So you've got Trooper, Mentat, Planetologist, Bene Gesserit, and then the Swordmaster. But you can unlock additional skill trees by visiting trainers that you encounter throughout your travels. You unlock skill points by completing missions and exploring. Now, I was playing as a trooper that specializes in explosives and ranged weaponry, and my favorite skills were the Shigawire Claw, which you actually start out with if you go with that backstory. Not only was it fantastic for exploration and climbing, but you can also use it in combat to stagger an enemy, and then the other one was the Assault Seeker Drone that explodes on impact. That one was really cool as well, but there are a lot of other stuff in the game. There's like anti-gravity fields and just a ton of other active and passive abilities that I regrettably didn't have time to try out. I know the Bene Gesserit get some crazy wild mind control powers like Compel, where you can make enemies walk towards you, so there is going to be a lot of replayability there. Outside of your character abilities, you can also equip yourself with a Holtzman shield that'll protect you for a short while until the power runs out. So the little yellow bar along the bottom of the UI, that is the remaining power in your power pack, which of course can be upgraded, and then you can also equip Suspensor belts, which are useful in combat and great for exploration as well, allowing you to jump from massive heights unscathed. So combat is a big part of the game. Overall, I find it to be a fun and engaging system. If I had one critique, I would say that compared to the shooting mechanics, the melee animations, they seem a little bit slow and stilted. It would have been nice to have perhaps a few different combos that you could perform with melee weapons, just for variety's sake. But this is an earlier build that we were playing on, so hopefully the animations will have improved a bit closer to release. I know that they have delayed the game by about 3 weeks until the 5th of June to apply some finishing touches and additional polish, so I think that is always a good sign when a developer realizes that that's needed before the game releases and not afterwards. Now, talking about parts of the game you're going to be spending vast quantities of time on, crafting is going to be one of them, and this is the part of the game that I actually found to be the most addictive. So some of the starter items can be crafted upon your person, like bandages or the makeshift knife that you will use to cut through your first moisture seal, but for the most part, you're going to want to build yourself a chome shelter, otherwise known as a base. So there is a fully fleshed out base building system in this game, complete with decorations, different types of roofs, walls, doors, flooring, etc. You can see I didn't really spend too much time experimenting with this. I was never destined to be an interior designer. I am more of a practical base builder myself, so 4 walls and a door is all you're going to get from me. But I saw plenty of impressive sprawling complexes created by other players all over the map, and these actually won't decay unless that player abandons them, which is pretty cool. Now, once you've built yourself a shelter, you can place various machines in it, like refineries, repair stations, fabricators, and storage containers. And the way this works is you first need to unlock a recipe in the research menu, and to do that you're going to need intel, and this can be acquired by leveling up, exploring, killing enemies, pretty much just playing the game in general. So once you research whatever you want to build, you can place down a blueprint, and if you have the necessary materials, build it on the spot. Most of your equipment, like weapons and armor, those will be built through the fabricator, but to do so, you will need to gather certain resources first, like one of the types of metal. So the Hagar Basin you start off in has copper, and as such you can only really build copper items, and then the next zone has iron, and then you move on to steel, etc. So these metals can be harvested from nodes with a cutter tool, and you take them back to your base, refine them into ingots, and then combine them with other materials to make stuff. So, for example, weapon components can be found on ships that have crash landed, and armor components can be found in Imperial testing stations. However, as you progress in the game, some materials can be rather tricky to acquire. So sandflower, for example, only exists out on the open desert, and much of the time, it just so happens to be located around drum sand, which will likely attract a sandworm. And by the way, these are the small ones, not the big ones, so as the game progresses, crafting that endgame gear is going to be a real challenge. Now, outside of weapons and armor, you can also craft vehicle parts. You've seen me scooting around in a sandbike. That can be outfitted with a number of add-ons like boosters or inventory space, and later on in the game, you will of course get access to other vehicles, including the Ornithopter. You can make various gear that helps with your survival too, so you've got medkits and bandages, blood bags, water containers, blood harvesters, and you can make a blood purifier too, so that instead of drinking that blood, you bring it back to your base, extract the water from it, and then you can use that in crafting, or simply fill up a container before you set off on your travels. Now, one small gripe here from me is that for a game that places such a strong emphasis on crafting, the inventory system leaves a lot to be desired. You will find yourself making tons of storage containers because each one is so small, it only has around 10 slots for items, and there is no way to link them all together. So if you can't remember which one you deposited something into, or maybe you have many of the same item in all of them, you've got to go sort through all of them. It doesn't look that bad, I know, but after having played the game for 20 hours, this just kind of really began to be quite tedious, so I do hope to see some improvements coming in the future in that regard. But let's switch gears and talk about the mission system, because this game does have a narrative and there are primary and secondary quests or missions. So the first of these are under the story tab, and here you can find trials that you need to undertake to connect sort of with the ancestors of the planet. I won't show too much from these because there are significant spoilers there, but they are the main driving force behind the narrative, and they will be marked on the map in purple. Then you have faction missions where you can align yourself with either House Atreides or Harkonnen, and finally you've got miscellaneous missions that sort of teach you how to play the game really, how to construct items, and give you a gentle nudge in the right direction. So one of them might be, craft yourself a blood bag and a blood extractor, and then use it on an enemy. And then you've got the blue contracts. These can be picked up at various trade posts around the planet. There is a contracts board. Some of them are just text-based instructions that you receive, but others come with fully voiced characters along with their own dialogue. I will say that whilst the dialogue is decent, the faces of the characters don't look all that great compared to how good the rest of the game looks, because I'm sure you'll agree, the game looks absolutely gorgeous. So I did feel like the facial animations were a bit dated. It was a little bit jarring for me, but that's a fairly small nitpick. It didn't really spoil the experience at all. However, these contracts are a lot of fun to take on. So some of the best ones I did had you enter these Imperial testing stations, and these are buried underground, and they will have you spiraling down, walking their labyrinths deep beneath the sand. Of course, you will find plenty of loot down there, like the blue materials required for crafting armor, but along the way, you will find voice recordings from the people holed up in these testing facilities to give you a little bit more lore from the game. More often than not, it's going to be from the final boss of sorts that awaits you at the end. Now, through these facilities, you will often find ID armbands that will then let you pass through certain areas. So they are quite linear in that regard, and you're not really going to get lost, even though they can go quite deep down under the sand. Now, all of that is only the content I experienced in this little early game demo section, but in the mid to late game, there are the social hubs, so there's going to be Arrakeen and Harko to explore, where the player will meet to socialize and trade. There's the Deep Desert, which is a massive PvP area where factions fight for control of spice, and every week a giant storm sweeps in across the map, resetting it. Outside of that, the rest of the game doesn't have PvP, except for in the derelict ships. So with the exception of the very first ship, because you're just new to the game, all of the other derelict ships will be these little mini PvP areas, so make sure you watch out there. There's also the Landsrad, which is an endgame mechanic by which factions compete for control of neutral objectives, and the winner gets to select a new policy for that server, which will affect everybody on the server. We don't really know all too much about either of those systems yet, because they've kind of been keeping them under wraps for the time being. And then, of course, as you progress, you will get access to bigger and better vehicles, weapons, armor, and all that good stuff. You can inhale spice, of course, and effectively go on a trip, enhancing your natural abilities. It's going to be a fun time. Now, I can tell you guys that the monetization plan for this game is to charge a one-off fee for the box product, so there will be no battle passes or anything like that, and then later on they will simply sell DLCs every 3 or 4 months. So the game will be ever expanding, but it's free of that live service model, and that has, in my opinion, become way too popular these days. I honestly prefer the way we did things, back in the good old days, where you make a good game or you make a good DLC, and if people like it, they will pay for it and they will buy it. Put your money where your mouth is. The proof is in the pudding. Whatever else you want to say about it, I just think that's the better way of doing game development. So really, really happy to hear that that is the plan with this game. So Dune Awakening is out on June the 5th. However, you will have the chance to try the game for free. I know that they are planning a beta weekend on the 9th of May, and I believe I will have a few keys to give away as the date draws closer. So if you're interested in that, I recommend following me on X or Twitter. That's usually the easiest place to give things away. You can also tune into Funcom's official stream on the 10th of May, where they will be giving away thousands of keys, I believe, and you can also sign up for the beta over at Funcom's website and also wishlist the game. All of those things will increase your chance of getting selected. So, hope you enjoyed today's video, guys. If you did, leave me a comment below letting me know what you think of the game. A like is always appreciated, and I will see you guys in the next one. Cheers.